All right, apologize for the slight delay. I think I'm logged into everything now. And hang on, there we are. Thank you for those members that are here. Ms. Carter, Ms. Cash, Chairman Haffey, Vice Chair Haggerty, Ms. Kushner, and Ms. Scott. I do not see any other board members online at this time. Thank you for the staff that are with us online. We have a full agenda today. A lot of interesting information, opportunity for, I think, a lot of important discussion. We're going to learn some stuff and see some more about what's going on. So before we get into the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the December Facilities Committee meeting.
Chairman, go ahead. Chairman Martin, I've reviewed the minutes and would move their adoption.
We have motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. The minutes are passed. The first item on our agenda today is to take a look at the schematic design of the Rex Road Elementary School. Whoever is going to be on the lead on that, we welcome you to the table. As they're coming to the table, I went through and looked at all the materials last night. I think this is going to be a really fascinating discussion. We're going to learn about an awkward site and what do you do with it and turn it into a real educational opportunity. I think we talk a lot about sustainability sort of indirectly and don't realize how much that becomes part of the normal operation of what we do. So I think this looks to me like an exciting opportunity where y'all have worked amazingly well with the site to make it a great learning space, not just a building. So we look forward to the presentation.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you the schematic design concept for Rex Road Elementary School. Thank you. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the design team and their efforts on this project. Vines Architecture is the architect. Frank Jackson, Jeff Schroeder, and Victor Vines are the primary design members of the team. Also want to acknowledge the efforts of Balfour Beatty, our CMAR. With every project, we start off with a visioning session, and early in the design process, we brought all the stakeholders, the CMAR, the designers, the planners, other members of the Wake County to basically create the vision for every project. And what we try to do is establish goals and drivers that help to lead us through the design process. And here's just a few of them that you see in your presentation there, that providing a thoughtful design that is welcoming and safe, that meets our program goals, but always keeps the children first. To the greatest extent possible, create a learning environment that extends beyond the walls of the building. We always encouraged exploration and discovery within the framework of an adaptable and flexible education environment. And we always promote integration of economical yet impactful sustainable design. And to apply innovation and new ideas to deliver optimal learning environments for today and in the future. And this next segment is where Alice is going to talk about the site. And as you mentioned, this is a very challenging site. And but one of the things I've learned in my years of architecture is that challenging sites can sometimes yield some of the most exciting solutions. And I think this is an opportunity to have a really exciting solution for this site. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Alice.
Hello. So just to orient you to the E52 site, we are in the western side of Holly Springs. The site here is in the blue, the light blue in the center of the map there, with Holly Grove Elementary School probably northeast, it's 2.3 miles, and Buckhorn Creek is almost due east at also 2.3 miles. The light tan area you see to the north of our site is actually a new residential development going in. So you can see we're going to have students right away. The existing site is 40.8 acres. There are multiple streams on site. That's the light blue lines kind of fingering through the site. And between each of those streams is a little ridge. So the whole entire site creates a rolling topography, which, given our large footprint program areas, creates a little bit of a challenge. And also wanted to point out, similar to other schools in this area, we do have to extend utilities to the site. This slide shows you just a couple concepts that the design team created as they explored the site and identified the opportunities and constraints of the site, and which led up to the discovery and the development of the site plan in front of you here. So there is a lot to talk about on this slide. I'm going to start at the bottom, the south, and proceed through the site to the north to explain the elements all combined in there. So this, at the bottom of the site, the kind of grayish, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's the gray line here is actually Rex Road. So the building sited here, the big white piece, the entrance is directly facing Rex Road. And the vehicular circulation is pretty much concentrated on that southeast corner of the site. So the driveway to the far east is the parent driveway. You can see the long carpool stacking drive. That's 2,625 linear feet of stacking. It will be double stacked, and it does meet the MSTA requirement for carpool stacking. It does surround the parking area, and then the children are dropped off directly in the front of that building at that entrance. Parents proceed to the west as they exit through the driveway on the west. The driveway on the west also is the bus and service entrance and exit drive. So buses and service will enter there. Buses will loop around to the front of the school, drop the children off at the front again. So we have carpool riders and bus riders arriving at the same point in the campus on the building. Service proceeds around to the kind of northwest in the back of the building at the end. So what some of the exciting points that Shane was talking about is, you probably can't remember from that slide with the streams, but that dark green mass in the center between the carpool drive and the building is actually one of those streams. So the topography, again, dips down to that stream level. So what that does is on the eastern side of the building, between those nooks of classroom spaces, the design team is looking to terrace that topography and create actual classroom spaces outdoors. Or looking to shape those spaces to be used to support curriculum outdoors in kind of a confined area, which teachers have indicated, that is an easier way to take kids outside when they have sort of a defined space versus having the kids look at a vista. They can get distracted easily. Further north on the site, you see two kind of light green areas surrounded by trees. At the end of the building, this is the K2 play area. So that keeps our little guys closest to the building. They actually exit the building from a side kind of near the dining area and then walk around to the site. And the 3-5 would proceed probably along the carpool drive to the play area. Also, the design team is looking at creating a path through that stream bed. We still have to, examine all the logistics of that. But speaking of sustainability, studies have shown that when children have some daily contact with nature, it really creates an empathy for nature. So not only implementing sustainable practices within the building, but looking at ways to use this site to create future stewards of the land. And I have to direct your attention to the small little vignette again and bring up this third play field here at the top of the site to the north further. So we are, because of the topography, we cannot meet the play program with our typical 2 play fields. So we do have another play field a little further north. Again, it's a little bit further away, but also I probably don't need to tell you, but that time that children spend to walk out to the playfield helps them disconnect from the academic environment, give their brain a break. And again, as they're returning back to the classroom, they can reset their brain to get ready for more cognitive instruction. So it's not necessarily a negative. It's actually might aid their time in the classroom. But also the pathways that link those fields can then be extended north to that property line where that neighborhood is going in. So now we've created a walkable and bikeable situation. And then let me finalize this site presentation by talking about the infrastructure. These areas, these light blue areas, kind of at the ends of the play field would be our stormwater. And then north, the upper northwest portion, you see a little black dot. So that's going to be a pump station on the site. Again, not unusual at some of our elementary schools. And why this is required is although the neighborhood, the development to the north will have utilities, we have to get under that creek and then back up to the manhole. So we do need that pump station to pump back up to the infrastructure that will be in place. And along the site through that portion, east to west, we will be granting a sewer easement per Town of Holly Springs standards. Again, not too unusual. We will not be installing sewer at this time, but the easement will be in place for future sewer if necessary. And then water will be coming back on Rex Road, coming from the east and across our property frontage per Town of Holly Springs UDO. And then finally, finishing up at the very northern part of the site, you see wooded areas. Town of Holly Springs requires a 10% tree save as well as some robust buffers. So we'll be able to transition nicely from the school to the neighborhood with that vegetated buffer area.
Thanks, Alice. Just to add to what Alice was talking about as far as the site is concerned, where you see the building placed is the largest and flattest area on the site. So we took full advantage of that. And fortunately for us, it puts the building in a really nice position relative to the rest of the site so that it really sets some really nice views and opportunities for outdoor learning.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. The question I had, and I was looking ahead a few slides to the topography. You know, when you look at the uniqueness of the site there, do you have any risk of like stormwater flooding or things flowing down if the school is built, you know, there and sort of the valley below the hills? Do we have to build any special mitigation for that, or how would we?
I wouldn't think so, but Alice is a site designer. She knows better. But the stream is pretty far down. I mean, there's a pretty big topographic change from where the building finished floor elevation will be and where the stream level is. So I don't think we'll ever get there, even in a 500-year rainstorm.
Okay. No, I mean, there's the stream flooding, but then there's also just runoff coming down
Runoff,
from
right.
the hardwood into the wetland, and so that's,
Sure,
I just didn't
sure.
know. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
No, it's a great question.
But the building is built at the high elevation.
Correct.
So yeah, the 500-year flood, we're all in trouble if this floods, I think.
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so the hardwood forest is in the lowland on
Right.
that map. Okay,
Yes,
I got it.
yeah.
Thanks.
So you can just imagine the spectacular views you're going to have down into that ravine and all that nice wooded area. It's really going to be a spectacular school site when it's done.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We don't often hear spectacular.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's so funny. I was so excited when I was doing E44 because I inherited a golf course site, and I thought that was going to be the best site in the world. But you know, it's these, like my opening comments was, it's these kinds of challenging sites that sometimes yield the most exciting solutions, and I think this is one of them. So, you know, what started out first as a concern has evolved into something I think is going to be very special.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Cash.
Okay, first and
Ms.
foremost.
Cash had a question?
Oh, another question. I'm
No,
sorry.
just a quick question, looking at this. The number 8, which is apparently dining patios, there's a number 8 way at the top of the map. I think it's an 8.
Oh, that's the S for stormwater?
Oh, that's
The-
S
in
for
blue?
stormwater.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
Oh, okay, S for stormwater.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes me, okay, that's good. Thanks, never mind.
Yeah,
I was
we're
right
not going
there
to
with
walk
you.
across the site to get to the cafeteria.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why we're getting a dining site out to the right. Okay,
Only for ducks.
okay.
Or is that a pedestrian bridge? I'm sorry, I was reading it differently. That top yellow, or the top 5 and 6?
The forest ramble and then the pedestrian
Yeah.
bridge?
Yeah. You're looking at the blue dots, I got you.
Right.
Sorry.
We're good. Go ahead.
Okay, great. All right, first and foremost, the building will be designed to meet current Wake County space standards and guidelines for educational facilities while striving to connect the building to the site through preservation of as much of the existing topography and vegetation as possible. Yeah, first floor is on the left of this slide here. The building's main circulation spine runs along that one ridge just to the left or the west of the ravine that we were talking about just a minute ago. As Alice described, the front entrance to the building is at the bottom or the south end of the building. And as you enter the building, the teal color on your left is the administration office. The red blob, big square shape on the right there is the media center. So as you walk in the main lobby, you're greeted by the administration office and the media center. You'll see a rendering of that interior space in just a minute. And as you move down the spine of the building on your left, the other red buildings there, or red spaces, are the art and music patio, or classrooms and patios. Again, they'll have outdoor spaces connecting to the outdoor and those fantastic views. The classrooms are the orange spaces, yellow-orange colors, and they're organized on those wings that form outdoor courtyard spaces for play and outdoor learning. And then as you progress further deeper into the building to the north, you see the pink and the red zones there. The pink is the play area, the gymnasium sort of space for elementary schools. And then you have the dining in the red. And then at the very end of the building is the stage or platform, which is still a work in progress, but we're trying to make it as flexible as we possibly can. Again, pulling it apart from the old concept where we had the dining hall, the gym, and the stage, and the stage was always landlocked during PE. So we're working to make sure that that's as flexible and available to other uses as possible. On the right-hand side there is the second floor. And what's kind of interesting about this, again, when you see the rendering, it all come together. When you enter the first floor lobby, the main stair is right there. So it makes for easy access up to the second floor classroom wings, again, in yellow. And oh, by the way, all the kind of pink areas kind of scattered along the spine and in the classroom wings, those are our learning commons spaces. So a lot of those learning commons spaces were populated along that main spine. Again, so as you're progressing through the building, you have these nice views out through the learning commons out into the natural areas. And as you progress down the main corridor on the second floor, you go straight to the end, and there's another stair that leads you straight back down towards the play area and the dining hall. And so that, again, provides easy access to the outdoor learning classrooms to the east side of the building. So it's very simple, but yet very direct and very efficient in the way this building's laid out. And then the other thing I'll mention about this building is that from Rex Road, it actually sits down a little bit. So when you enter the site, you'll take that winding road, the Parentwood, and come back to the building, and you're actually going downhill or down grade to get to the front door of the building. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Of course, we're very early in the design of this building, and one of the things I've always cautioned designers about is making sure that, an education building for, this grade level, elementary, needs to reflect the fact that it's for elementary school kids. And I'll be honest with you, one of our criticisms about this design right now is that it could be on a community college or, college campus. So we want to try to make this thing a little more kid-friendly, and we want to bring the scale of the building down as much as we can so that it relates to the height and size of, smaller, younger kids. And so we're going to continue to work on this, but it's a great first attempt. I think there's some really neat things going on here, but, we've got a little bit of work to do. But, first attempt looks really good. Okay, next one. And this is that rendering I spoke about earlier. As you walk in the front door, you enter the lobby, and the media center is on the right there, so it's very open and inviting. The administration's to the left, so it's, the very front door of the building is very open and accessible and very friendly. And so you can move up the main stair there, up to the second level, which is mostly second through fifth grade. Pre-K, kindergarten, first grade are all down the first level. Okay, next one. And again, this is the view on the east side of the building, where we hope to have more outdoor learning opportunities and also some outdoor play opportunities as well. So, so we're still in the early stages, so we're working with the designers to kind of tweak this a little bit, but this kind of gives you a flavor of where we're headed with this. But, and I guess I would just like to close by just respectfully requesting approval of the SD submittal for E52. And that's our presentation for today, and open it up for questions.
Thank you. A few questions. Ms. Kushner.
I have a couple of questions. One was the proximity to Sharon Harris, and if we need one of those alarm things
Sirens.
at this school. And then second, if you could walk us through the bus and carpool. I'm not quite clear, given that they're coming in one entrance. If you could walk us or drive us through that
Okay.
on the map. Thank you.
Sure
Well,
can.
and as you prepare for that, I had some of that same question. Bus and carpool, can you talk about, crossing patterns, right? Because if everybody's dropping off at the same place, will a bus student traverse the carpool? And if so, how will we control pedestrian traffic so children don't get hit?
Okay.
So to answer your first question, it's 4 miles and some change from the cooling tower at Sharon Harris.
Okay.
I guess it will need a siren. Not all the schools
There-
within that radius do.
Okay.
Likely, they'll need to prepare an evacuation plan as well as we did with E51.
Okay. So similar to E51? Okay.
Correct.
You get used to it.
It's part of being there.
It was
you know.
loud and full and
It's part of
the
being
other
in that
day,
part of the
yep.
county.
And Sharon Harris has a very safe track record. It's
Absolutely.
actually noted to be one of the safest plants in the country.
As a matter of fact, we're meeting with the folks at Sharon Harris next week on E51 about relocating that siren.
Okay.
And so that'd be a great opportunity for us to just kind of have this conversation about this school.
Thank you.
And I imagine there's one in the area because,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can hear real loud.
No,
Yes, I should clarify. I don't know if a siren will be needed on this site because they're located, Okay, carpool. So parents will be coming in on the driveway at the east, and as Shane said, driving down, decreasing elevation, going around the parking lot, looping back towards the front entrance of the school. And it's, they're dropping off on that straight portion and then angling into the entrance of the front of the building. So students will be embarking there, and then parents will be proceeding to the east, and then they will intersect with the bus loop. So I imagine, and I have to say, we're still kind of working through this entry detail. Specifically, that parking, I think, can be incorporated better, so we have less pavement out there. But likely, a staff member might be required to be posted there to allow buses to proceed through or stop, and allow parents to proceed through and stop. There's only about 10 to 13 buses that serve the elementary schools. So you're right, the opportunity for conflict is there, but it's kind of slim, and we will be continuing to monitor that closely as we go through the design phase. Not only that, but the MSTA division of DOT will be reviewing the plans as well and making comments on that. That is a question I actually asked MSTA about too. And, what do we need to look out for here? How do we make this work best? Speaking with transportation department, we definitely want to keep kids on the school bus. So how do we make sure the buses can operate smoothly so we get more ridership on the buses and less kids in carpool? So we are definitely keeping that on the very front of the to-do list. So the buses will enter, like I said, on the west, and they'll come down the driveway, turn to the right, and loop around to the right, so that that door that the kids get out of is on that side of the building. The kids will be exiting directly onto the sidewalk and entering the building through sidewalks. So not crossing carpool traffic at all. If you're familiar with Holly Springs Elementary School, how buses are on one side and cars on the other, and they share the same entrance walkway into the school. So that's the situation that will be created here. So then buses will proceed around the loop and exit back out towards Rex Road.
Great. Thank you for that refinement and continued attention. I just want to point out in just a second that, we're often challenged by, can't you build schools cheaper? Do you need this much land? Notice that the carpool loop takes up almost as much land as the building itself does. That's not what used to be the case when I first was on this board. But, so carpool not only has the problem of idling, it's nowhere near as efficient as riding a bus, and it increases our land footprint significantly. So just, to the public, riding your bus actually is the most efficient, and it's environmentally friendly, and it's better use of land. But right now, we have significantly had to add to the cost of our schools simply because of that carpool lane. So just something to point out for us to think about. Part of our sustainability conversation is how do we make sure that our bus transportation is efficient and effective, because that's good for everybody. Ms. Mappy.
Well, and I'll
Chairman
just add, if you want to join in that sustainability effort, you can go to wcpss.net/busjobs.
Right.
But thank you for this. I know that this is a challenging site, and I appreciate your team as well as our architecture team tackling this challenge head on. And I know there's a lot of excitement around this site because not only did we see the one PUD that's coming, but we know that there are more on the way. I'm curious about the capacity or the anticipated capacity of this. I noticed this is a 2-story building, but it's also kind of a longer footprint than we've seen. So what can you tell us about that? And then my other question, kind of going into the capacity piece, and I know Marcella is here, Ms. Rory is here as well in case, we're venturing into her territory, of having the mobile classroom zone versus, our kind of tiptoeing into having the extended capacity built into the building.
Yeah, well, this school design started with this, what we call a large elementary school space standard, which is 716 students, 800 core. And it remains predominantly that. I think there's been some discussions about those mobiles, because we're required in all elementary schools to try and find a place to place 4 mobile units at some point in the future. And so, our team has worked to do that. But it's a challenge on this site. So like I said, I think there's some discussion about maybe not having the mobiles on this site because of all the constraints that we're dealing with. But, we continue to look at it and see if that opportunity is there, but the capacity of the school is still what we consider a large elementary school.
Thank you so much.
Other questions? Ms. Scott?
Thank you. In the, for gathering spaces for assemblies and so forth, could you, and I apologize if I missed this, but just looking at this and not really being able to differentiate some of the colors on the map, but where that looks like the PE area is next to the eating area, and are those connected? Do those have the ability, like the accordion style?
This school actually could have the accordion partition if we wanted to. And I say it that way because some of the newer designs where we're separating the stage or platform from the play area, part of what we're trying to do with the stage is bring in some movable partitions on the stage. So that's an extra cost to do that. And the reason why we do that is to let that stage be as flexible as possible. So if that wanted to be a dance recital room or a magnet program with dance, then they could use that stage for that purpose if we had some walls on it. We didn't have basketballs, flying into the curtains and doing all the noise that comes with that. So having that a separate space would be ideal. So we've been playing with the idea of not spending the money on that big curtain because it's not just the cost of the curtain, it's also the structural steel that's required to support that curtain. And so we take that money that's in our budget and we shift it to those other needs around the stage. And so we're kind of reusing what we have internally built in. But we could put that curtain in this design because it does separate those two spaces and the stage is on the other side of the dining area. So yes, that's a possibility. Now, I will say that just the dining area alone, based on the square footage, we can seat, based on 15 square feet per person, we can seat between 330 and 360 people in that space. So I guess the question is, how big of a space do we really need? Do we need the ability to seat more people at one given time than that?
I appreciate that. I think sometimes it's helpful for schools when they want to have school-wide assemblies. I certainly understand that in the time of COVID, many of those things are not even on anyone's radar, but looking forward, I think schools do appreciate that opportunity to be able to gather different grade levels. And then even from a community use standpoint, I think it makes the space a little more flexible for schools to have the ability to open up their space for community members to rent or use as well when we have the ability to have larger, to at least be flexible with the larger spaces. That's just one point of view, but I know this is obviously not quite there yet in that planning phase.
No, but that is an important consideration. I mean, I don't think we ever are building any buildings where we can have whole school assemblies anymore, but a 300 would be a rough, not quite half the school. You could definitely do it in thirds. Yeah, which is a challenge. Related to those spaces, just a little curious, a number of our more recent designs, we've tried to move some of that performance space, I'll call it, a little closer to the entrance so that you don't have to walk through the entire building. That deals with the security issue, staffing issue when open. So this design looks to me like it's primarily a walk through the entire building to get to those spaces. Though I know there was the service entrance back around the backside. Are there any plans where you could potentially have a public entrance so that you could avoid going through the entire school to get to that space?
That's a great question because we have discussed that possibility with the design team, and we're going to look at other opportunities for locating that stage in a more what I would call a front door or more public area rather than being so deep into the building. Yeah, that's a great point. And we will continue to look at that.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? I mean, what I'm seeing is a great initial draft. Do we hear a motion to basically give it the thumbs up and move on to the next stages?
I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm happy to make that motion, Dr. Martin.
All right.
Second.
I guess we'll do it with the committee members. Motion by Ms. Cash, second by Vice Chair Haggerty. Any more discussion?
I think this is a beautiful site, and I think this is needed in this area of Holly Springs. And, you know, I think people have been waiting for this, and they're going to be excited. And I appreciate all the T-Rex pieces that the architect has already put in.
Yeah, no, I think this is going to be really, the complicated site is going to give just a fantastic school. So thank you.
Good work on a very challenging site.
Absolutely. All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Thank you. And let me note that Board Member Johnson Hostler has joined us remotely. And I'll keep watching for your hand, if Monica. All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is a topic that Vice Chair Haggerty and I have discussed a fair amount in terms of thinking about what we need to do for the Facilities Committee. You know, we often hear bits and pieces of some of what I'm going to call the more systemic or structural challenges facing us, from employees to the maintenance operation budget and whatnot. And as a committee, as we approach the budget season, I think it's important that we understand sort of the landscape of where we're starting, to know what to advocate and how best to advocate as we approach the budget season. There's lots of stuff here. We're not going to be able to put into a budget the dollars that it's going to take to get us up to a per square foot maintenance standard. We're unlikely to right away get salaries that are going to be competitive that we're going to hear about today. So we're going to hear about, I think, needs that are way bigger than we're going to be able to do in any one budget cycle. But that's exactly, I believe, our responsibility as a board, to understand that systemic issue so that we can begin to lay out a long-term plan to address that. So we're hoping there will be some really good meaty conversation here. Let's not be afraid of asking the details, but let's also recognize that we need to understand this and then put it into the context that's going to be doable. And our doability is partnering with the county commissioners to make sure that we can fund it, right? If we just go and ask for everything, they're going to look at us crazy and walk away. We don't want to do that. We want to start with the understanding so we can articulate where we need to go. So that's sort of the layup to this presentation. Nate, we look forward to, I guess, maintenance budgeting 101.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. I hope I can live up to all of those expectations of this presentation. I'm Nate Slavic. I'm the Senior Director over Maintenance and Operations. I'm also the Director over the Energy and Physical Plant. I do a little bit of the utility analyst job and sometimes a project engineer. So I try and wear a lot of hats. We have the presentation up or not?
Because we don't have enough staff, and so he has to do 6 jobs.
I'm trying to find them. Is it not shared right yet? What's that? Okay. Not you?
Mr. Slavic, I need the ball from the host so that I can set that up for you.
Well, thank you very much. There she goes. Wonderful. And thank you to Ms. Parker for hosting this remotely for me. Okay, today I'm going to provide a brief overview of the maintenance department. We'll look at the funding history of the department, the staffing structure, and the challenges that we face with recruiting and retention. I'll provide some examples of initiatives that have been reinstated over the last couple of years and the issues that we see on the horizon. We'll conclude with, Betty, let's skip forward one more, please. We'll conclude with how we propose to invest additional funding into the department and how that will affect the services that we provide. There we go. So when reviewing the historical funding for the maintenance department over the last 20 years, there was an upward funding trend from the year 2000 through the 2009-2010 school year. In 2009-2010, the facilities in our district totaled just under 21 million square feet, 3,800 acres, and almost 140,000 students. The maintenance budget was just over $42 million, or about $4.50 a square foot. Then as the recession affected the overall school budget, the maintenance budget decreased accordingly. The maintenance budget would not reach $92 million again until the 2018-2019 budget. That year we received $99 million, but by now the school system had grown over to 24.5 million square feet, 4,900 acres, and 160,000 students. As a result of this growth, our funding equated to about $4 a square foot. The 2020-2021 maintenance budget was $104 million. This amount represents an 11.5% increase in operating dollars for maintenance over the 2009-2010 budget. Over that same period of time, the total facility square footage increased by 5 million square feet, or about 20%, and the acreage grew from 3,800 to 5,075 acres, an increase of 33%. Maintenance funding has never fully recovered from the recession more than a decade ago. While there is a significant budget for maintenance, concessions have been made over the years to accommodate the available resource. The focus of the department has shifted from providing all services to focusing on those which would keep us from opening and operating a school building. 3 years ago, a budget case was presented and adopted into the superintendent's budget to fund a multi-year increase that will restore the maintenance funding to align with pre-recession rates. Next slide, please. There we go. The department looks different than it did pre-recession. It was condensed to provide similar services with fewer staff members. Open positions were eliminated as cost-saving measures. Staffing rates have largely remained the same since the department reorganized in 2009. Despite our increase in square footage, our regional maintenance team, who are our building superintendents and our first line of maintenance response, have not grown respectively. Instead, the areas that they take care of have been restructured to incorporate the additional square footage that they take care of with the same resource. The grounds department has also not grown despite the additional acreage. Over the last 6 years, the maintenance has converted some contract dollars to a few additional staff positions. These new positions were created in the energy and physical plant for severely needed technical personnel, HVAC technicians, energy management positions, and most recently an elevator and chiller technical specialist. These staff members work specifically on equipment that is essential to operating a building. Some of these new positions have yet to be filled as qualified candidates are difficult to recruit. Even the top end of our pay scales cannot compete with private industry. Licensed technicians are in high demand and are commanding higher and higher wages. We're also having trouble filling other positions throughout the department. Grounds and custodial services have long-standing vacancies. We hope that the recent wage rate increases will help bring candidates to fill these positions. As a result of our department reorganization and the ongoing difficulty in recruiting and retaining staff, many of our services are outsourced. For example, site landscaping, which is at one time an in-house service, is almost entirely by contract. All roofing work is sent to vendors. A considerable amount of our custodial services are performed by outside vendors, and we dedicate a significant amount of funds each year to contracted heating and cooling repairs. In the board meeting a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Martin was discussing prospective staffing absences related to COVID-19. He stated that if 2 to 5% of any organization is out sick, that organization will have a difficult time operating. The statement caught my attention because in June of last year, I had staff pull our vacant position report so that I was familiar with where we stood. At that time, our department vacancy rate was 12%. The energy and physical plants rate, which are our licensed technicians, was 24%. So considering Dr. Martin's statement, we've had a difficult time operating and delivering the service that we should be capable of. department staffing. I know we just touched on some staffing shortages, but I wanted to provide some examples of where our shortages are most evident. Regional maintenance are comprised of teams of 3 to 4 technicians that maintain around 1 million square feet. So that's 3 to 4 people that maintain 500 2,000 square foot homes every day. There are currently 25 of these teams in place, and this year we'll approach nearly 27 million square feet, plus another 1 million square feet in temporary construction. Custodial services is experiencing some staffing pains as well. Under the current staffing plan, our elementary schools have 1 daytime custodian. It's difficult to cover when these staff members need to be out sick or take vacation, as our small group of floating custodians are needed as substitutes in several locations every day. It's further impacted by COVID and quarantining policies. Supervisory staff is also shorthanded. There are 19 people supervising staff and ordering supplies for nearly 200 locations. As I previously stated, our specialized technicians are difficult to recruit and maintain, but we also have very limited positions created to maintain this critical equipment. There are currently 2 specialized boiler technicians on staff to care for over 450 machines. There are 2 chiller technician positions to care for almost 300 machines. While we do supplement this staff with outside vendors, the equipment that they care for can easily close a school building if not addressed in a proper and timely manner. Our elevator technicians in a similar situation. With only 1 on staff and a newly created position for a second, they're responsible for operating our over 250 elevators and chairlifts. While these units do not close a building, their operation is essential for many staff members, students, and custodial services. Ask any principal, and they'll tell you that an inoperable elevator is more than an inconvenience. The grounds department has a wide and varying list of responsibilities. There are 12 positions in the grounds department, 3 of which are currently vacant, leaving the remaining 9 people to maintain our irrigation systems, mow and maintain our stormwater retention structures, inspect and repair our 400 playgrounds, clear storm drains, deliver mulch, and remove debris and trash from our campuses. There's 1 person who manages and inspects all of our grass cutting and contracted landscaping throughout the county. 6 of these 9 staff members have more than 30 years of service. So it's going to be challenges to provide maintenance services. At this time, we're seeing the following. Costs for goods and services are on the rise. This is not unique or specific to maintenance, but it affects us just the same. Recent increases in minimum wages are affecting our largest contracts with vendors. A recent bid for landscaping services showed an almost 200% increase over the previous bid by multiple vendors. Custodial services expects a 20 to 30% increase in cost for new bids moving forward as a result of the minimum wage rate increases. Even vendors that are not directly affected by minimum wage rate increases are expected to raise rates more than we've seen in previous years. If funding remains the same going forward, we'll need to make some tough decisions about the amount or the frequency of the services that we provide. Personnel shortages are not only affecting our in-house staffing, but our vendors as well. Again, minimum wage rate increases and competition to fill vacancies are providing additional opportunities for people. As a result, our vendors are losing staff members to other job markets and are struggling to fill vacant positions. Our new facilities, as we've just seen, are beautiful and wonderful buildings. They're also slightly larger than their predecessors. They have additional facilities, more complicated grounds and landscaping, and additional technology. These items, while they're wonderful to have, are always a concern for maintenance staff. We don't love new things. We like the things that we know that we can take care of. So we're always concerned of can we and will we be able to maintain these as well as the systems and the equipment that we're used to. Finally, deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is not only not performing regular upkeep of an asset, but also the operation of that asset beyond its expected life cycle. Every organization experiences both types of deferred maintenance. Years of tough decisions related to funding allocation has kept maintenance from painting, replacing flooring, caring for some finishes, and replacing equipment. We're also arriving at a time when a significant number of buildings are due or overdue for their 20-year renovations. These deferred renovations are extending the operation of the existing equipment past its expected life. This creates a situation where equipment may fail, requiring a significant repair or replacement on an emergency basis. As additional funds are received for maintenance, it's our intention to provide additional technicians to self-perform duties in the field. We will also create additional positions to manage vendors and contracted services more efficiently and effectively. We will provide additional contracted services. With the additional funding that has been provided over the last 2 years, maintenance has started painting schools again. We've replaced flooring. We've provided landscaping services with greater frequency. We're reinstituting practices that have not been provided with consistency for the last 10 years. Additional funding will allow us not only to keep the doors open, but to improve the look and feel of our facilities. We will be able to help close the gap between the new schools and the old schools, repairing, refinishing, and replacing aged and worn finishes and equipment. I would also like to utilize these funds to conduct a comprehensive pay scale review for our positions so that we can propose the necessary changes to enable us to compete with our peers for qualified staff. So we have a reliable core to our maintenance department staff, but we're down to that core. An additional investment in new and existing positions is necessary to continue to provide services reliably into the future. Additional funding will also make it possible for the maintenance department to provide service in a more timely manner, to a higher standard, and to reinstitute services that have been deferred for far too long. Before I conclude this presentation, I'd like to take a moment to show appreciation for my staff. I've had the pleasure of working with some of the most hardworking and dedicated individuals I've ever met. There are several members of my staff that have more than 30 years of service to the maintenance department, and they're invaluable assets. Our staff work on holidays, weekends, and through the night to ensure that we can open the doors and have school the following day. Whatever's been asked of them, they've never let me down, and for that they have my gratitude. I appreciate the opportunity to present these points with you and to continue to evaluate funding for all of our programs. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Slavic. An important presentation, lots of information. I suspect, I jotted down a number of numbers, but we can't keep track of all those. I wonder if there'd be any way that we could either, maybe not the full text, but if we could get even just a bulleted summary of that information you provided, I think that would be extremely helpful for us as we try to frame this in the future. Yesterday we started a little bit of a conversation about our strategic planning, and I'll just note that one of my comments was, we have a tendency when we think about strategic planning, right, it's all about the students, and yeah, that's what schools should be, is all about the students. But it's easy for that to go into curriculum and academic sorts of things, and we can often forget that, infrastructure is necessary for the school to be successful. And I think, you've outlined some of these things. Part of the reason why I'd love to have some of this information is as we go into the strategic planning discussions, I'd like to see some of this information sort of get incorporated. I don't know what it should be yet, but we need to incorporate some of these ideas, into our strategic plan. Just, your goal of a renovation every 20 years. And we got 200 schools. That means 10 a year. And we're doing how many a year?
It's hard to say. We do a lot of partial renovations. We do some HVAC replacement. Right now, a lot of our smaller scale life cycle projects really identify infrastructure.
But isn't it safe to say that this kind of 20-year renovation, we at best do 2 or 3 a year?
I think it depends on what you want to see. I think there's an opportunity there when we renovate a school at 20 years. I talked for a second about closing the gap between the old and the new.
Right.
And I think it's important. I've heard it from principals. You know, my school is 20 years old, and it's not like Rex Road's going to be. I think there are opportunities there for us to determine what's included in a renovation of that nature. How do we revive that school, not only the infrastructure, but the classrooms, so that, you know, that school's going to be there at least another 20 years. So those are just other discussions I'm happy to be a part of.
To put a sort of finer point on what Dr. Martin is asking, the large-scale renovations we've engaged in as a district over the last few years, which are about 2 to 3 a year, include sites like Neuse River Middle, Stowe Elementary, or West Millbrook Middle, where we basically are raising a new building because of the amount of work that needs to be done, because of the amount of time that has passed since large investments were made and routinely in the buildings. So I think, you know, partial renovations, improvements are something that we're looking at moving forward, but if you're looking at the type of scenario you said that would be 10 a year, every 20 years, we're going far longer than that. And because we're going far longer than that, more like 40 years, I think, it is a larger cost, and we're finding that those renovations are whole scale, sort of raising and starting over.
Right. Which costs more. And I think you noted that, you know, the more deferred maintenance we have, the more it costs when we actually go ahead and do that. So anyhow, I think this does a good job of sort of setting the framework of where we're at. Like I say, there's no way we're going to be able to do this all in one budget cycle, but I think we really do need to understand this and start to work on that game plan. I think, Ms. Kushner, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, this is such important work because this is the taxpayers' assets that we are charged with taking care of. And I think we should relate that to the commissioners in those terms. And I would encourage, when you talked about getting those numbers, if the communications department can help us communicate in graphs, or I think, you know, you're comparing it to maintaining 80,000 homes or whatever. I mean, I think folks need to get the sense of the scale of our maintenance. And it's not like the county, you know, we have how many more times square footage as the county, but there are partners in this. So I think somehow we need to convey to them the scale of your needs in the department.
And again, I think our trick is conveying it in this really is significant and a lot of work, but it's not the sky is falling, we can't do it. You know, I'll come back to we got to. It's not can we, it's how can we. Right? We have to do this.
Yeah.
How do we do it?
It's clearly local.
Yeah.
And it's
Local is responsible for capital. Yeah, Ms. Scott.
I wasn't the first person who had my hand up.
I'm sorry.
But I'll.
Well, I saw it I saw it most
But if it's
recently.
okay.
We'll make sure that everybody has opportunity to.
Sorry, no, I appreciate that. I share what Dr. Martin said. This is such important information, and I cannot thank you enough for summarizing it the way that you did. And more importantly, I cannot thank you enough for the work and the work of the people that work with you. It is incredibly important. And thinking about our legislative agenda and, you know, why, because this isn't just these types of careers we're not just finding shortages in Wake County Public Schools, we're finding them in the private sector as well, as you mentioned, with the people who you would normally contract with also not having these employees, and we see that. And when we get into how can we encourage or make working for Wake County, you know, incentivize that, I can't help but to go back to wonder if it doesn't relate to those benefits that the state used to provide for retirees. I mean, that's just one piece of it. But do you have a magic ball? Like, is it? I mean, do you have a sense of the pulse though of what you're feeling with people who work in this industry? Why there is a hesitancy, or what other career paths people might be choosing?
I certainly don't have any definite answers. You know, I know that obviously taking away certain benefits from retirement, I'm sure have an effect, but I'm not positive. You know, those of us who are we're going to be career employees and try and get to our 30 for our retirement. I mean, those are the goals you're striving for. But no, I don't know. I don't know if it's a lack of technicians in the industry. I know that it's highly sought after right now, and there's not enough people doing those jobs. So I think regardless of where we are in the pay scale, it's going to be difficult to compete. I know that private industry competes for the same people. So no, I don't have a clear, concise answer for you, unfortunately.
I appreciate that answer, though. Thank you.
But clearly, salary, benefits, and working conditions are what you need to be successful to hire people. So, Ms. Cash.
Well, I think that's part of it, but I think it's educate the people going into those fields. I mean, I doubt that there's that many people going into some of those fields, like technical fields.
How can we incentivize them to want to go in?
Well, I mean, it's not always salary and benefits.
So I do
Well, salary
think-
and benefits and working conditions are necessary to hire, but yes, I mean, that's why we have our college and career academies. Wake Tech has a strong, HVAC program as well, for example. We're increasingly creating those opportunities, but there are many more. I think there's many more opportunities than are being solicited.
Can we grow our own, the way we're trying to do the teacher corps?
We might be able to, but it's like we can't even contract, so it's obviously not the salary and benefits, because we can't contract companies that are hiring, but we need to probably grow our own.
Can we
you're right.
target some of our career academy students? And,
So I will say that as we continue to grow our early college programs and partnerships with Wake Tech, for example, I do think there is space. And we've done a little bit of this already. Some of you have attended the contract signing of students who are coming out of CTE programs directly out of high school with jobs that they have. But I think there is space for us to consider what that may look like, both for the students that we fill the pipeline with in those early college programs, and incentives that we could provide those students for job opportunities immediately upon completing their degree or their qualification and that sort of thing. I will also say one other thing that has come up is in non-school government type jobs, one of the things that school government type jobs provide are some benefits that you do not see in other places, whether it's health insurance or pensions, retirement benefits, that sort of thing. Depending on your wages, you also find private industry and other folks that might pay a similar or higher wage but aren't making those deductions, which means those folks have more money in their pocket because they're foregoing the benefits due to needs that they may have with families or obligations and those kinds of things. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at what's happening in terms of folks who intentionally, younger folks in particular, who will intentionally forego benefits in order for more money in their pocket early on. And I think the pipeline. So there's lots of things that are at the root of it, and there are some things I think that we can do. Our programs are not big enough to supply our needs. I will tell you that, though. So it's not a magic bullet, but it certainly is a place to start or take a look at what's happening.
And I see, Ms. Taggart, just quickly following up on Ms. Kushner's point of growing your own, which I think is a great idea. Do we have internships in the Wake County Public School? I know we with the SHED program, with a lot of our CTE program, we've got some really great internships with business partners, and I don't want to minimize those, but I know that we're often at a loss for we don't have enough internship partners for the people who could supply those positions. Would an internship program be useful? I mean, having internships in my lab periodically, sometimes it's more useful, sometimes it's less useful. Would there be areas where there could be value in an internal internship program?
If we are teaching students how to be electricians, and if we're teaching students how to work on refrigeration, and if we're teaching students how to be plumbers and carpenters, yes, it could be. In terms of looking at what's causing all of this, it's everything. We're all competing for the same people. Unfortunately, as you all well know, many people have chosen not to continue working since last June and July, so that compounds it even greater. So it's a smaller market of people to choose from. I can tell you that we as a district are working on other things, discussing recruitment and retention and how we can do it better. I also think it's very important to create an environment for the right people. So whereas many, many years ago, if you got a job with the school system, it was something, it was great. Well, we need to get some of that mojo back. And it's not only about money. It's not only about benefits. It's also about working conditions and being a part of a team and being a part of something good, something great, and wanting to make a difference. And those are avenues that we have to explore as well.
No, I appreciate highlighting that, Mark. Chris? There's plenty.
So, just to Mr. Strickland's point, I mean, we have to recognize that working conditions are a part of this. It's not just pay. You know, the job we're asking people to do, if you're asking someone to, you know, be service chiller and boilers, but they're working in high-rise luxury apartment buildings versus working under other conditions with dated equipment, it's very different. It's a harder job, right? When one job, maybe it's the same pay, but it offers you the latest tools, the latest technology, more state-of-the-art things available to you. And in another position, you're constantly having to go back and service the same stuff. This is, you know, Mr. Slavsky used the term, it's a very polite term, about deferred maintenance, right? And I mean, what is deferred maintenance? Deferred maintenance is we haven't been able to pay to take care of the stuff that we've needed to take care of. And you can see how it costs us down the road. I know other folks have other stuff to say, and one of the reasons that Chairman Martin wanted to have this presentation is to expose everybody to these numbers and really get their reactions to it and really talk about this, because sometimes maintenance and operations seems to be, you know, we tend to think of it just more in technical terms, and we don't realize, you know, how much this impacts other things in our schools. If we don't have heat, if the AC breaks, we can't have school that day. If there are flooding and plumbing issues, we can't have school that day. It directly affects that. We're seeing that with the ventilation issues with COVID. You know, these issues are all tied to keeping schools up and operational. You know, things that stood out when we talked about fewer dollars per square feet. I mean, I think it's important we communicate to people how much growth we've had in terms of how many more buildings and how many, you know, how much more territory that we're responsible for when we haven't been able to grow staff to meet those needs. We're asking the same number of people to do a lot more work, and then how important that work is. You know, just even as we wrestle, you know, we've got capping questions that are coming up later in the agenda. We deal with school choice issues, the condition and the appearance of schools, the successful maintenance and operation of the schools is a factor in the schools that people want to attend. And if we want to keep people, you know, in our schools and not looking to leave certain schools, they have to have a quality learning place. And so as we put our budget together and as we talk to commissioners and talk to the community, I hope we can come back and use a lot of what you've put together here. And so if we can work with communications on some of these talking points, this is important work, it's great work, and we just need to make sure everyone knows how important it is.
Chairman Happy.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And I'm not going to belabor what my colleagues have already said. I mean, we knew well before and then put it into action in 2019 in our 5-year plan with the budget with the commissioners that this was an area where we were losing people. We needed people. We knew we needed to be more market competitive. And I thank you for your honest numbers that you brought to us today. But I just want to take a moment to thank you and your staff for going above and beyond, because we know this pandemic has exacerbated everything. And, you know, we take time to thank the people in our classrooms, but I just want to take a moment to thank the people who take care of those classrooms so that learning can happen. And I know that that's even harder when you only have a certain number. I think you said 9 staff members in one department and 6 are above their 30-year, and hopefully won't leave us anytime soon. But I just want to say thank you, because I know that these are not easy conditions to work in, and we appreciate them sticking with our schools and helping our students.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Ms. Cash. And by the way, that's an amen from everybody at the table. Ms. Cash.
So we did this, and we did a 5-year multi-plan, but I don't know what we did with it. We projected one, but I don't know where it fell on the budget because we cut a lot of our multi-year plans. So if it's our priority, did we cut it?
We've maintained some of it every year, but not all of the proposed every year. So I think that that's a good next step, is to provide, and we could probably actually do that in a finance committee meeting, all of the multi-year plan goals and where we are.
Okay, that would be helpful, because when you say we did this in 2019, yeah, we did put a 5-year multi-plan out, but we never did really fund it all the way through. We got the funding from the county commissioners because we put it to them in that
We
respect.
still got a couple more years, but I hear I know what you're
We
saying.
We're not on,
Yeah,
we're not on
there yet.
schedule.
Yeah.
We got
Okay.
1 year of that funding, but
Yeah, but we're not on schedule.
correct.
And so I think we need to be really, really aware of what we're doing with that schedule because we put it out.
Well, I had a good conversation with the commissioner just yesterday at the Tools for Schools opening, and I actually think there is a willingness and interest to have this kind of communication, because long-term planning is makes a whole lot more sense. It's laying out the good business case. It's not saying, I need all this right now. So, yeah, I think there is an appetite for having this conversation. All right. Anybody else? Karen?
Yeah, a couple things, but I think now most have been taught, and I kind of piggyback on Ms. Cash and just say, it's nice to have multi-year plans, but it's going back to the salaries. If you don't have a specific layout, we're starting here, and every single year of that plan, this is what we're going to do. And if we don't, going back to the table and saying, well, now we got to readjust, then, it's a concern just to say you have a plan. If it's not a specific plan and constantly being addressed and laid out where we're going, and if we can't get there, why and what are we going to do? So that's that. And then I just appreciate the information, not only about the staffing, but also about how that impacts and the other monetary issues about not being able to address some of our older schools and keep them. Because when you can walk into one school, drive 2 miles or less, and it looks like, where are we? And then you tell that school, we can't get you what you're asking for, but this other school looks like it's, top of the line. For me, it's hard to continue down that path when we are a great district, and there are schools that, in my opinion, need a lot of work. And I know we've addressed this before, but then if it's one thing is fixed and they go down the list again, but yet that other school sitting there sparkly and shiny, is still sparkling and shining, and this school continues to go down the list. So that's just, I have a concern about salaries. I have a concern about that. And I'm just glad to have this, open discussion. And I'm looking forward to what becomes of it down the road and getting more of the specifics and exactly where we can go. So thank you and your team.
No, and I think you're absolutely right, Ms. Carter. I mean, what we don't want to do is we don't want to say we don't want to be building the quality today, because what we just saw with Rex Road, all right, is fantastic. That ought to be the standard that every one of our schools can have. And by the way, we're Wake County. We can do it. We just have to develop a plan to make it important. But to both of your points, yes, we had laid out sort of a 5-year initiative. We got one, and then, it fell away. This happens all the time, right? A recession or pandemic or something comes, and so we say, oh, we can't. But then what we don't do is we don't follow up, right? We came out of the recession, but the school system never saw the return. As Mr. Slavic noted, right? We sort of stayed there at the bottom. So we can't cut in both good times and in recession times. We've got to reinvest, and this is where, I think as a board we've fairly successfully developed this 7-year rolling capital plan. Does everything get funded there? No. But every year we come back to it, we reassess, we say, okay, here was our plan, here's what we thought we needed in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, out to 7 years. But every year we sort of come back to assess it. So as we think about laying out these 5-year or 7-year or whatever they are plans, right, we're not going to get everything done in 5 years. But how are we coming back to it? So how do we develop somewhat of a parallel type structure that requires us, right, to set out that 5-year plan, that 7-year plan, whatever it is, but every year, where's our next 5-year plan? Where's our next 5-year plan? So if we can work toward that, I think that begins to address the concerns, again, whether it's salaries, whether it's M&O, or what? Ms. Kushner?
Well, I was going to ask Mr. Slavic and Ms. Strickland, can you tell us what we did in December with the pay scales? Did that help boost some of your team at all, or were most of your folks just getting the bonuses and some of the state's increases?
I may be mistaken.
I can't remember it all.
Yeah, I may be mistaken, but I believe that touches most everybody.
Okay.
I think everybody's gotten a piece of that, and I know that I was actually just reading through the Understanding Your January paycheck the other day, trying to figure out exactly, there's so many different changes that were made at the same time. Staff was wondering, hey,
Right.
how does that affect me? But I do believe it's affected most everybody. In the department.
I know we have far to go, and we need to make it not just bonuses, but a long-term plan, as I think my colleagues have said. But and I think it would help us if we could communicate with the commissioners those numbers that you went over. But thank you.
Well, thank you again from all of us on the board. Please thank your staff. And the whole reason for this conversation was so that we can be the best advocate. I think we've got the foundations for a very strong business case. It's shaping it into a business case. How do we start? How do we continue? How do we not let it drop off in multiple years? And I think that's our challenge going forward. So thank you very much for the information. We'll look forward to potentially sooner than later a summary of that information. We might even find it useful in our discussions this weekend. But I also agree with the recommendation that we maybe craft something with communications that has a little bit more of a public face. But this information was extremely helpful, I think, as we go into strategic planning. Thank you. All right. Our next item on the agenda today is another light topic. And that is understanding capping. Capping is not something we really like to do, but one is faced with. We really hate to do. That is correct, Ms. Cash. But one has to when we get to overcapacity, we have to ask what are the options, and none of the options are great. So, Mr. Crosa and Ms. Rory, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having us. Today we bring to you the school capping recommendations. I'm joined today by Ms. Rory, the Senior Director for Long Range Planning. Staff is bringing to you recommendations for school capping that would begin immediately following approval, of course, at a future board meeting, and would continue through the 22-23 school year. The capping process includes input from the individual school's principals, the Office of Student Assignment, transportation, and long-range planning. As a reminder, enrollment caps do not affect current students at a school. When a school has an enrollment cap, it means that students who move into the base attendance area after the date the cap has been imposed may be assigned to a designated overflow school. Staff generally brings capping recommendations to the board annually following the finalization of the enrollment plan. As our school choice team continues to monitor school enrollments during the school year, we will bring any necessary updates through the facility committee should we need to alert the board to any individual school concerns. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Rory.
Thank you. This is the list of schools that were capped during the 2021-22 school year. Since 2018-19, we have averaged anywhere from 15 to 18 capped elementary schools, 1 to 2 capped middle schools, and 2 to 3 capped high schools. Here we see that the concentration of the most capped elementary schools are in the Western Planning Region, with a few exceptions. I don't think we're sharing anything that you all aren't already aware of.
The map is very helpful, however.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion as well. And also for, I was going to say Glenn's team, Office of Student Assignment, Dan and Rob's team for pulling those together for us. Okay. The two capped middle schools are also concentrated in the Western Planning Region. Two of the three capped high schools are located in the West Planning Regions, and one is located in the North Planning Region. When determining whether a school should be capped, many factors are considered. We look at whether a school is meeting the legislative requirements. We look at whether the school is implementing a new program or anticipating relief due to opening of neighboring schools, or if they're newly renovated schools. We evaluate how a school's core areas are able to support their populations for dining, the media center, etc. We evaluate if a school has exhausted all appropriate means of accommodating their classes without sacrificing the learning environment. We evaluate school sites to determine how many trailers are currently on the campus, if the campus has exceeded the trailer limit for that school level, and if more trailers can be accommodated. Per our CIP program assumptions, our goal is to limit the number of trailers at elementary schools to 4 and middle schools and high schools to 6. As you've heard me say a million times, meeting this goal has not always been possible during our years of extreme growth. It is important to remember that it takes a minimum of a year, and I say a year because from the time you request it up until the time it's installed and ready to be occupied. So a year from the time it's requested until we're able to occupy that space. We have maintained a line item in the 7-year CIP plan to accommodate trailer moves. But due to increased cost and the time for installation and occupancy, installing trailers cannot be viewed as a means to address immediate crowding. We also look at the impact of base student growth increases, since those students would have to be enrolled at that school. As part of our annual forecast update process, we meet with the planners for each municipality. They share data that includes all the projected short-term and long-term residential growth and development, including when they expect those developments to be occupied. When we know that a new residential developments are planned in the vicinity of a school, we know that these new homes have a potential impact to that school. When schools have already converted significant numbers of classrooms from non-capacity to capacity, it limits the options for accommodating student population growth. At the elementary level, there's less flexibility for assigning classroom space changes. For example, K-3 classrooms must be on the first floor. If a school has K-1 classes in trailers, our goal is to move those classes inside the building. If the school already has multiple classrooms where co-teaching or combined grades is occurring, our goal is to reduce the school's enrollment number so that each class has an independent teaching space. For middle and high schools, our capacity models allow for 26 students per classroom. This is typically not possible, and we average about 33 students per class. Schools have some flexibility to make changes in teaching space assignments to accommodate student growth. Elementary schools have limited flexibility due to the legislative class size requirements for grades K through 3. There is a waiver process to accommodate schools who need to exceed the per classroom limits, but school and district averages must be maintained. Although there is no state mandate for 4th and 5th grade class sizes, our goal is to accommodate between 24 to 26 students each. As we shared during the presentation last year, and will echo this year, COVID-19 has increased the unpredictability of school choice and enrollment. While it is easy to predict that we'll enroll the majority of Wake County students in the Wake County public school system, understanding the impact of other factors is more challenging. Having said all that, based on our current data, staff is recommending that the cap be removed from Combs Elementary and Lead Mine Elementary. Combs Elementary has a lack of new residential development anticipated in the assignment areas. And Lead Mine Elementary will see relief with the opening of new schools. When making capping recommendations, we look at the crowding in the brick and mortar building combined with the trailers on site. As we work through the capping factors and considerations with the principals, transportation, Office of Student Assignment, and long-range planning, we are recommending that Apex Elementary, Holly Ridge Elementary, Parkside Elementary, and River Bend Elementary be capped. Apex Elementary has a total of 4 capacity trailers, which meets our CIP planning assumption guidelines. The school cannot support increased enrollment and be able to keep classes in the independent program teaching spaces or accommodate more trailers. Holly Ridge Elementary has a total of 7 capacity trailers, which is above our planning assumption guidelines and cannot support additional units. Parkside Elementary has continued to grow as a result of the continued growth in this area, and the school has already reached a significant level of crowding. River Bend Elementary has previously been a multi-track year-round school and now as a traditional school is experiencing a significant level of crowding. As part of the capping recommendation process, we also recommend overflow schools to enroll additional students. Similar to the considerations and factors that are evaluated for capping recommendations, we consider those same factors for overflow schools. We also must consider transportation needs and bell schedules as part of this process for both capped and overflow schools. We are recommending Balcom Elementary overflows that Apex Elementary overflows to Balcom Elementary at Woods Creek Elementary and Penny Road. We are recommending Middle Creek Elementary as the overflow for Holly Ridge Elementary. We are recommending Adams Elementary as the overflow for Parkside Elementary. And we are recommending Fox Road Elementary for overflow for River Bend Elementary.
So feeder pattern caps. You're familiar with, feeder pattern caps. Many of you are familiar with this with Mills Park Middle School. In the Apex Friendship High School base attendance area, it has become clear that the growth in the area, that includes families with younger children, would overwhelm the already overcrowded school. The growth is so pronounced in this area that it's not sufficient to only consider capping out new families moving into the high school. In order to maintain operational efficiency at the school, an alternative process for capping needs to be implemented that will extend the cap to the feeder schools in order to manage future student enrollments.
There are 3 options that can be considered as part of the growth management process. We can cap schools after evaluating proximate schools to determine if there is available capacity. Also, would the change allow for capped out students to return to base? In other words, capping is no longer a viable short-term solution. We can evaluate if a school calendar change would allow us to realize additional capacity, what the impact would be to the school space. Would a calendar change help us avoid significant reassignments? And what is the area's growth going forward? Would the change allow for longer-term stability for the community? Lastly, we would look at whether we need to reassign students. Our transportation team works to ensure that buses run as tight as possible to reduce the time that students are on buses and to reduce cost. There is typically more flexibility in the mornings because you can move the start time up, but there is little to no flexibility with the second and third tier route. During a standard school year, bus ridership changes due to other factors, including parent choice. We just heard comments about the carpool lane at the previous elementary school. We estimate that approximately 11 additional buses will be needed to accommodate the new proposed school caps. Parkside to Adams Elementary would be 3 buses. Holly Ridge Elementary to Middle Creek would be 3 buses. Apex to Balcom at Woods Creek and Pitty Road would be 3 buses. And River Bend Elementary to Fox would be 2 buses. Buses are approximately $40,000 to our cost to our transportation department. Ride times for students will be increased. Prior to the pandemic, we supported a total of 756 buses on 3 tiers across the county, and we're still running at about that level. In a non-pandemic year, there are always challenges with hiring enough drivers, and we expect that challenge to continue. And our transportation department sends their regrets. They had anticipated attending with us and had some last-minute emergencies, but we will share any issues or concerns that we're not able to address with that team and bring results back for you.
So in summary, staff recommends removing the cap from 2 schools and adding the 4 additional schools as outlined earlier in the presentation. As our school choice team continues to monitor school enrollments, we will bring forward any updates through the facility committee should we need to alert the board to any individual school concerns that may need immediate attention once we transition to the next school year. Staff welcomes questions and input today from the board. We plan to bring forward a final recommendation for approval at the February 1st board meeting. As we had mentioned, transportation couldn't be here with us today, but we will bring back any questions or concerns to them as well. And we thank you, and we will be open now the presentation to dialogue and questions.
Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, and I apologize to both staff and the committee members. I'm going to have to step out for a minute, but I did want to ask these 2 things prior to our meeting, our board meeting, when these issues come up. The first thing, and I may ask about this in the board meeting, but to let you all know, I see the impact of opening new schools, like with our Barton Pond Elementary School, and how that impacted, we were able to take the cap off Lead Mine Road. But I was curious about the cap on Sycamore Creek, which is another multi-track year-round that is also capped, and sort of what benchmarks you would look at for taking the cap off of that. The second thing is in regards to Parkside. I remember there were people that thought that we couldn't fill Parkside, and now we see Parkside is so full that it's already capped. This one in the recommendation, I'll need more explanation for, because you do have Briar Creek that is also multi-track year-round, that's a little bit closer than Adams. And in terms of distances, I know you said there's a lot of factors beyond just distance, and so kind of hearing more of the justification for it, because you look at Parkside and you have to go through, the neighborhoods for Carpenter Elementary, Morrisville Elementary, Weatherstone Elementary, Cary Elementary, before you even get to the neighborhoods that traditionally go to Adams. And so when we look at maybe more of a long-term solution, maybe that's a reassignment issue, that there are other schools there that need students. And 2 of those other schools that you're passing to get to Adams are other multi-track year-round schools. I know Carpenter's accepted a lot of transfer students from areas further south. Maybe if those were just left open for that area, we could see that. Other year-round options up there, Austin Ridge is already full and already capped. So I'd like to hear some more about that. Either we can talk about it after the meeting, or if it's something that you can address in our board meeting, I'd appreciate it.
I'd certainly like to address that publicly.
Okay.
So starting with Sycamore Creek, generally what we do when we have a reassignment in an area, especially for a cap school, is we will not remove the cap immediately because we're waiting to see with the stability rules what kind of impact that will have. And a lot of times with the cap school, you will see high percentages, 90+% of the students who are eligible to return will return. So we're waiting to see kind of what kind of impact that has after year one. We will certainly look at it in year two. Getting to Parkside, I'm glad you brought that school up because and many of you remember the public meetings of parents saying how they did not want to go to that school because it was not traditional calendar. And here we are, just a couple years later, it's multi-track and we're ready to cap it. So there is significant growth in Western Wake. As I showed you yesterday during our presentation, when you look at the maps, it's lit up like a Christmas tree when you look at the crowding colors in Western Wake. Again, we've now got a multi-track year-round school that we're capping along with the other multi-track year-round school of Alston Ridge further west. We just don't have seats in the area. You brought up Carpenter. Carpenter is significantly overcrowded. Morrisville is hovering right around 100%. I think it was exactly at 100% when we pulled these numbers. We just do not have seats in the area. When you're talking about a multi-track year-round school that has available seats, Adams is the first school, as far as it is east, that has those seats. You mentioned Weatherstone. Weatherstone has an enrollment cap. Cary Elementary, which is serving as an overflow already. Briarcliff serves as an overflow. And a lot of those schools are pushing 100% as well. We just don't have the seats in the area. And I know I sound like a broken record, but K-3 class size legislation has significantly impacted Western Wake. We have lost seats in that area, in an area where we could not afford to lose seats to begin with.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Scott, I know you have to run as well.
I do. I'm sorry about that. I'm curious about the choice to not lift the cap off Beaver Dam Elementary School. I worry just with the communication I've had with constituents who live in that area, I worry that sometimes people will look at a capped school and they get a mind trip. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to go to that school. I'm moving here, that's capped. I'm just going to look at other options. And so I worry that when we have the ability to remove that could actually help retain a stronger, more stable base for the school. As you know, there is a charter school that decided to open up at the last minute, moved from saying they were going to open in the Garner area and then opened up right across the street from Beaver Dam. Beaver Dam's a Title I school. To my knowledge, this charter school does not have a weighted lottery. So I really worry about protecting the amazing staff and kiddos that are at Beaver Dam. And that sometimes when we leave a school capped, it has that negative, unintended negative consequence.
Before I let Ms. Rory answer, I just want to say I find it very interesting that, Ms. Scott, we've talked about this before. Your part of the county in Eastern Wake seems to be the only part of the county that doesn't like a capped school. We often see when we cap a school, you see a flood of families often clamoring to get into the school. But you are correct. We often do see that as not so popular. So I'll add Ms. Rory's comments.
Thank you. We actually did have multiple conversations with the principal about whether or not that school needed to be uncapped. And one of the things that we are going to be bringing forward to the board soon is a different formula for determining what our cap enrollment numbers should be. And as you probably noted, our Beaver Dam Elementary School, their cap enrollment number is significantly higher than what their current PMR membership is. There's also some additional residential development that's in that general area. And over the past few years, that school has had to reassign several classes within the building. They've had to co-teach. They've had to actually go through a lot of the things that we mentioned earlier in order to accommodate all of the classes. So in conversations with the principal, what we wanted to do was give one more year to kind of see what that turnover was going to be with the residential development. So more than likely, well, depending on what that residential development does, we may be having a similar conversation in the very near future. One of the other things that Glenn and also Mr. Carosa and the forecast team and I have been noticing as we've met with the municipalities, one of the things we've not been able to really get our crystal ball hands around is people that are moving around the county. So we might think an area has aged out, and then all of a sudden we have 40 more children coming out of a subdivision that had none. So those types of changes could send us back into an interesting, challenging situation for Beaver Dam.
Which brings up a great point. I mean, looking at Holly Ridge Elementary, that is a school that has had declining enrollment for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now they jumped into a situation where they need to be capped. And so, you know, we cannot predict a lot of it. There's not a lot of new residential growth in that base attendance area. They were seeing a decline. We were predicting to be able to start looking at removing some trailers at some point off the campus. And then because families can't seem to get any new homes in the Holly Springs area, they're choosing to purchase homes existing homes and then renovating. So these are the things that, you know, because of COVID, because of the market that we're in right now, that are extremely difficult for long-range planning to predict.
Well, I can't imagine, but I do appreciate the answer, and I appreciate acknowledging that it's just a little different mindset. So thank you so much for that.
And if I may also share, that's one of the things we'll be bringing to the board very soon as well, is the enrollment forecast. So remember, I made that crystal ball comment when we get to that point. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Mahaffey, then Ms. Cash?
And Ms. Cash is welcome to go first, because seeing as many of these schools are in District 8, I have a few questions that might,
All right, go ahead, Ms. Cash.
Yeah.
Everybody knows how I feel about cap schools, and they did not come about when I was on the board. We had to clarify that, because I think it came about after. Somebody thought it came about when I was on the board. It did not. It was not. Capping is so inefficient. It's so non-sustainable. And so I'm trying to figure out why we're capping 4 schools, and then you say we're adding these many more buses, and we don't have those buses. So now we're impacting all these children from different schools. And for instance, Riverbend Elementary, which is actually in Ms. Kushner's area, I mean, I don't know why we wouldn't multi-track it, because we're going to have more, it's been multi-tracked one time, and I know there's certain reasons why we could help them with multi-tracking that I think Dr. Williams actually did a really good job when he was interviewing for his candidacy here of how to help children in certain areas through multi-track, but that's off topic, I'm sorry. But now we're going to impact, by adding buses and probably impacting several bus routes for different schools. And I don't think Fox Road can actually take the additional, you could take the additional numbers, but I don't know if they can take that additional challenges. And so I don't see why we aren't multi-tracking a school instead of capping it and adding all these bus routes that impact so many different people. And I, just to piggyback on that, you know, we often get into reassignment and we'll say, we're going to reassign these neighborhoods in order to take the capping off. And then next year, as you said with Sycamore Creek, we can't really do that right away. But then 3 years might go by and we still haven't taken the capping off. So it goes back to, if reassignment doesn't help, it goes back to changing the calendars, because we can't sustain capping with the bus problems we've got right now. So I don't want to, especially I don't want to do Riverbend when I don't think we should cap any more schools.
So I definitely hear you, Ms. Cash. We've had this conversation. This is why we keep working on the calendar conversation. We started it just a little bit for the under-enrolled schools, but we need that same kind of frank discussion for the over-enrolled schools, because you're absolutely right. Capping is not sustainable.
And I did hear that. I wasn't here yesterday, disappointingly, but we tackle the underutilized pretty fast. I don't see us tackling the overutilized schools.
No, we don't cap the underutilized, but
No, I mean, we've
just started
didn't
to
mean
address some of
attacking.
the calendar
I
conversion.
mean, we're dealing with the underutilized schools right away.
But we have
I don't
not done it for the.
I don't see that coming.
They're two different. There's two different conversations, but it's one we need to have. Ms. Kushner, you had I think a responsive comment.
Apologize to Mr.
I have my
Hathey.
stuff written down, so I
Because
won't
it's
forget.
aligned with Ms. Cash. And this is a messy conversation, because I think in the past, I think capping has expanded because it allows stability for the students who are there. We have to acknowledge that is a direct reaction to the community's pushback, rightfully so, on reassignments and mandatory year-round, as it was called. A lot of families did not like the multi-track, did not like year-round, and a lot of schools were converted 15, 16 years ago, and that was a huge, the community, it was too abrupt for the community. But capping is inefficient. We can control a lot of, we don't have control over a lot of things, but we can control capping affecting the transportation. Our bus drivers are driving so many routes because of some of these complexities that we have imposed on ourselves. So we can control that and try to lessen it. That said, Ms. Cash, we didn't address Abbott's Creek in the last reassignment plan because we're supposed to do, we're going to do it next year. So we delayed that. So we have to.
Well, I do want to speak to that then.
I do want. So, and with Highcroft Drive, that we've heard a lot from Highcroft Drive, we did not reassign as aggressively from Highcroft, and it's been capped for a long time. Combs has been capped. I'm glad to see Combs come off. It's been capped since 2015.
Although Combs, by the way, is coming off, as I understand it,
Correct.
because we decided we can't remove the trailers. So there's our option there, right?
Yeah. But, and so some of these, there's hope for them. The ones that are, Beaver Dam doesn't have any student capped out, so I'm glad to see that solution, Ms. Rory. But it is frustrating. I share your frustration with capping, Ms. Cash, because it's inefficient. But it's allowed us to have some stability for existing students. So we need to figure out, how do we balance reassignment, multi-track calendar, and maybe short-term capping, not long-term capping? And that is a big, messy discussion to have. But we have to acknowledge we all want to respond to community reactions. I agree with what we did with Abbott's Creek to the point that we needed maybe to look at the calendar and or reassign more students or do something different with Abbott's Creek. But that's schools.
To address that, I want to reassign out of Abbott's Creek and not have it capped the following year, or I want to multi-track it. I don't want to reassign like we have some of our schools and then keep it capped year after year after year.
I can understand that
so
completely.
I was trying to follow what I've been speaking about quite loudly, and I wasn't around when we did the multi-track, whenever the system did multi-track, like pushed it really hard, really
But
fast.
that was also a year where 7,000 new students came in a single year. I mean,
Right.
That's
And
why it was so dramatic. 7,000 kids
Yeah.
is bigger than most LEAs in North Carolina.
Right.
So that's a different time, and I recognize we're not in that time now. But somehow we have to acknowledge the stresses that we have had as a community, and I think if we could not have class size limits for K-3, a lot of this would go away. So let's add that to the mix. We can't control that, however, but unless we want to ask for waivers. Is that possible? I want to ask, could we ask, because and saying that we want stability for families and capping is stressful, can we ask DPI for a waiver a compassionate
That's an idea.
waiver from, I'm sure the superintendent of DPI wants stability for kids.
You're talking about specifically with K-3.
With K-3 class size for
So-
Western Wake schools where we are struggling with this.
So one of the provisions in the waivers that are allowable for K-3 class sizes is for a school to demonstrate a percentage growth. I think it's like 2% or something in the grade levels impacted during that school year. So I think what the language contemplates in the DPI structures that came from legislation was that you address it for the next year, and so that waiver is in place for that school year. But I think we can certainly look into what the numbers of the schools looks like year over year in terms of what kind of growth is happening during the course of the school year and how that is sustained into the next school year. But that is the only place where that is in place in terms of an option for the language that's already there. I do believe it's in your legislative agenda moving forward to take a look at it in terms of crowding and inability to build and that sort of thing. So that contemplating that type of language and expansion within it would also provide that relief.
See, I think that's a great idea. I would rather ask for a waiver than cap with the intention we don't even have a bus to do it.
Correct.
I mean, it's like pie in the sky. Why are we capping when we don't even have any buses? So I'd rather do that. That's less pie in the sky to me.
And it's, pardon?
That's less hard to get than.
I think it's pie in the sky. I don't think we have much confidence the DPA would
Well, I don't have any confidence that we have any buses
ask,
to
don't
drive
get.
these kids
Right.
either.
If we don't ask, it won't happen. No, so I mean, we just had a conversation about deferred maintenance. Here we're having a conversation about deferred assignment. I mean, we have not dealt with growth, particularly in Western Wake.
We continually deal with.
Well, we deal with growth. We don't have any solutions to it because there is no magic bullet, and I think we started effectively to start looking at sort of the criteria for under-enrolled, but we need that same for looking at over-enrolled.
And the Mills Park schools have been capped since 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And we reassigned a lot of students out of Mills Park, and it's still capped.
That's right.
So we need to figure something out about those schools.
Ms. Mahaffey.
That's a wonderful segue into many of my questions, Ms. Kushner. Thank you. And while we're talking about class size and K-3 class size, I think in another presentation, Dr. Martin, if we could get just a refresher on the impact of class size on these schools in Western Wake and the number of seats lost. I remember those conversations being very impactful in helping families understand the why we're having to do this. And I think as we move forward with not just capping or reassignment, but as we move forward with our year-round conversations, I think it just helps people understand the constraints that we're in.
Mr. Croza, is there any chance that some summary of that could come when the recommendations come to the board? It strikes me that could be some good context. I mean, this is a vote that nobody really wants to take, but it strikes me that some of that context could be useful at that time.
Yeah, I think I can have staff pull up some of the old slides. It may not be, we may be pressed for time to get it with actual data today, but we can give a reference to the slide we gave at the time. I want to say it was something like we lost 10 schools.
And more and
something
more
like
families
that.
have moved to Western Wake, so I mean,
Exactly.
it's probably more than that.
But we can work on it to try to get at least something in there for context.
Well, and the other piece, as we're talking about capping and the challenges, is not just the lack of drivers and the lack of people to drive the bus, but it's the distances that we're asking our students to go through. I mean, going from Parkside to Adams, or Hortons Creek to Pleasant Grove, or Alston Ridge to Briar Creek, I mean, those are some fair distances in a car. And then to have your kindergartner on that bus, I think everyone at this table and everyone on staff recognizes that that's not any position that we want to be in. And so I think we just need to acknowledge it. And as, you know, if we ask DPI, I think that's something else to put in there is that time on the bus. And I do want to go back to the new capping recommendations of Apex Elementary and Holly Ridge. I'm guessing the Apex Elementary, because we have the two schools listed of Bauckham and Penny Road, that will be split by geography.
That is correct.
Would you be able to let me know where that is, and so I
Yeah.
can communicate,
Roughly, we're looking at Highway 55.
Okay.
So anything south and east of Highway 55 would go to Woods Creek, Bauckham at Woods Creek.
Okay.
And then anything closer east of that would go to Penny Road due to proximity.
Okay. And should this cap continue, Bauckham Elementary, when it returns to the site on Hunter Street, will also have the capacity to continue, should this cap continue? I hope not, Ms. Cash.
I think just something, wishful
Yeah.
thinking, looking ahead, we'll have another elementary school in the area with another one on tap for the year after that. So that's what our hope is that the new schools in the area will help relieve the crowding and remove the cap.
All right. And then with Middle Creek, with the recommendation that Middle Creek go to single track, I'm assuming that the capping recommendation for Holly Ridge Elementary was put into that
Yeah.
formulation, but I just want to ask, and
Holly
That was
Ridge
taken
is
into
year-round, or
consideration.
They're traditional.
they're traditional.
They're traditional, so the single track will make it easier for the
Yeah,
cap.
and-
Not easy, but easier than the multi-track.
And we have a lot of traditional calendar schools that are capped out to a different calendar, which is,
Not ideal.
a whole nother. I did notice on the additional materials, there was an increase in the cap enrollment for Alston Ridge Elementary from 902 to 996, and Holly Grove Elementary from 834 to 874. Can you talk us through your thoughts with that? I know you do a thorough review of these schools as you're looking through.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. Yes. When we looked at Austin Ridge Elementary and also Holly Grove Elementary, their previous cap enrollment numbers were lower than what their school building capacity and including trailers was. So while we're not making recommendations to change the cap enrollment numbers for all the other schools, we felt that we really need to go ahead and at least address those two and at least bring them to what their current capacity is.
Okay.
And I think part of that, too, for Alston Ridge is because they had trailers added to the campus
did,
that were not
yeah.
previously there.
And then, Mr. Croza, you talked about the feeder pattern cap. As we go out and explain that to families in the base area of the fast-growing Apex Friendship High School base, can you give an example of what that means for someone who currently has an elementary student prior to the cap, or someone that comes in after the cap at the elementary level?
Yep. So if there's a family that lived in the base attendance area prior to the cap, they would not be added to this list.
Okay.
Okay, so they are safe to flow up and enroll at that particular grade level when they get to high school. This would be for families that do not qualify for the cap. What happens is when they enroll in the student assignment database, they are assigned a number, a waitlist number, and then what we can do is we can control the incoming ninth grade class based on the number of seats we have to have available for students as they roll up from 8th grade to ninth grade. So therefore, under current capping, a regular capping situation, you've got students who may move in 8th grade, could move in, tomorrow, or the day after a cap, and they get to roll into the capped high school because they were intending 8th grade in Wake County schools, and they just roll up, okay? This feeder pattern cap prevents the overfilling of that particular grade level by capturing the students of when they've moved into the cap base and whether they qualify prior to them rolling up to ninth grade. So therefore, we can set the number of ninth graders that will come in that particular year.
And just for reference, do you happen to know the current enrollment of the ninth grade for the high school? Just so my colleagues can hear it, because I think I was about knocked over when I heard how many freshmen they had this year at Apex Friendship. It was.
So you 1 second. So
And that's in 1 year of capping. And
You're looking for the current enrollment or the current ninth grade class?
current ninth grade class.
Current ninth grade class at Apex Friendship High School has 773 students.
Yeah. So that's quite a bit. And
That is.
I think this recommendation is hard. I think this recommendation is hard for families, especially when they've built within community and they've wanted to, roll up with their classmates. I think it's a challenge. I think this is, when you look at that high enrollment number for your freshman class, it's something you have to consider. But I think it means that we have to look at the things that are available for our high school students moving forward. And hopefully, as we get more elementary schools in the area, looking at feeder patterns. But I also know that this is a community that's fairly new. This school opened in 2015, and I think nobody wanted to go to that school way back
It was
when.
another one of those
So we
schools
were
that was
told.
never going to fill.
Yep. And, yeah.
I'll just add one thing. We do have Felton Grove High School, which eventually will provide relief to Apex Friendship. So, it can't make any promises, but it's a safe bet if you're an early elementary child that the likelihood of you needing to be capped out to Apex Friendship after we've opened up a brand-new school may be a lot less than maybe a current 7th or 8th grader.
Yeah. And yes.
I just had a quick question. I'm trying to recall how, because this is not the first time we've done this. How does notification happen to families? Does it happen upon enrollment in elementary or middle, or at what grade? Will it happen in middle, at least in middle school if it's coming soon, and it still exists so that they see it upon enrollment and not after they become enrolled?
So the school's data manager will have copy of that particular list. The Office of Student Assignment has access to that information as well. They can share it with families. And the individual school where that student is attending, their data manager can access it as well in Oasis.
Okay. We just may want to maybe test that flow or process, because if you're enrolling in 7th or 8th grade, it's better, I think, to know as you enroll in 7th and 8th grade versus getting it on your assignment strip for the first time between 8th and 9th grade.
Yeah. Or even just, reminders. If you enroll in 5th grade and that feeder pattern cap is on there, and then all of a sudden you're going to 9th grade, I mean, that's a lot to remember, and I don't think anybody's excited about this. And just kind of touching on what Ms. Cash talked about, I mean, we have capped schools on our list that have remained capped despite reassignment to other schools. I mean, are we going to anticipate seeing these schools as a part of the overcrowding year-round conversation? I imagine every school on this list would kind of be a part of that as we go and look through, but I just echo my colleagues' comments on just the shared continual frustration that I know you and your team have looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, the current situation we're in is you're looking at a significant reassignment if you're not looking to change calendars. And when I say significant, you're looking at moving a large number of students from Western Wake schools to, let's say, Eastern Western Wake schools, and then Eastern Western Wake schools into central schools. Yeah, you're looking at a huge wave. Wave, because, as you can see from our cap situation and the overflow situation, how far we are going until you get an available seat. I'm not sure, based on conversations that we have all had, that is a viable option at this point. So we've been trying to address these issues one-off as they've come. The next conversation will need to be the calendar conversation, and is that a viable option? And so we're working on metrics to present to the board that, if we're in this situation, in lieu of a massive reassignment, do we want to look at a calendar change for a set time period to deal with the crowding in that particular area in lieu of capping, or also with capping, depending on the seats available? Because like I said, we've got some multi-track year-round schools in the area that are also capped.
Yeah.
So you will need to see some reassignments if we look at a calendar change, and we can come up with a scenario to share with you to make it clear to the public. But I think the other piece of that is lessons learned from 2008, 2009, right? It was a necessity, as you'd said, the large growth coming in at that time. I think educating the parents and the community about the need and the why and how we're exhausting all these other options, and we've tried for the last decade to exhaust all of these other options, we're at a limited capacity now. And so we are going to need to make some decisions that maybe parents don't like in order to make this work for everybody. I think the very hard part about this, as somebody brought up, is parents move into a base attendance area because they want that particular school, and that's why they don't like reassignment, they don't like capping, and we understand that. But it becomes a facilities issue. And like I said, the K-3 class size legislation has severely instigated that conversation of needing to have more seats and make a different move rather than overfill these classrooms.
Yeah, and we've seen with our Rex Road site that we're having to be more creative and kind of broaden. I don't think 5 years ago we would have looked at that site and thought it was something we should pick up, or 10 years ago. And so that adds to the expense when you're dealing with stormwater and streams. And I think, to Ms. Kushner's comments, we have to be responsible to our taxpayers as we're building as well. And it's just,
Even if we had all the
difficult.
dollars, we cannot build schools fast enough.
And there's
not a labor force to do it.
there's no green space. I mean, you still need
There's no
land.
and we couldn't
Yeah.
do it. Ms. Kushner and Ms. Cash, I want to be sensitive to the time. We're 10
Thank you.
minutes over.
Yes,
but
we are over. And
Yeah, Ms. Carter.
I'm going to say, let's ask for a waiver for some of these Western Lake schools in particular. But looking at Apex Friendship and the other two high schools, maybe I missed it. Can you tell us again why we're not removing the cap from Panther Creek and Heritage, particularly since Heritage is feeding to Rollsville, which is getting crowded?
Sorry about that. We actually had quite a bit of a conversation about Panther Creek in particular, and one of the things
Because it was affected in the last, in our, the reassignment plan that we just, we didn't do that.
pulled
That's
that
right.
off.
We pulled that off.
Yeah, she pulled that.
But, okay, so that, my
That's why the
bad.
cap stays.
Well, but we also, there's not that many students capped out.
No.
And given, there's only 2 capped out, and it looks like the capping number is 2575, and current membership is below that. And the same with Heritage, it looks like it's it's close, but given that they're overflowing to a full high school, and I'm sorry, short of time and I'm repeating it.
Ms. Cash, did you have a closing question? Ms. Carter, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So the Panther Creek, we got the answer because we did not do the reassignment. Oh,
We had a lot of discussion about Panther Creek and about Heritage. The biggest challenge for Panther Creek is that when that school was originally designed, we were between the 16 to 1700 design area, and to have 31 capacity trailers on a campus was a bit much to swallow. So even though they've dropped in the capacity right now, we did not feel comfortable pulling that off because of that, significant number of trailers on that campus. Similar conversation for Heritage High School. Those are 2 prototype schools. So if we looked at what number of students we have on those campuses and the numbers that we were originally anticipating, they are significant.
And Heritage does not allow, the landscape does not allow for mobile units on the campus, so we need to be very careful about the student enrollment at the school.
Ms. Carter?
Well, the Panther Creek was one of my questions to ask, so thank you for asking that. And I just, I don't want to go too long about the cap thing, and the year-round thing, but I'll just say I think it is a little bit different of a conversation because, we had folks approach us about being in support of transitioning some underutilized schools to a single track. I've not received a request yet for folks begging or, saying how much useful this would be to go to year-round. So for me, that's a difference. So for me, that also means community engagement is very big in this. Yes, we can have board discussion, that's wonderful, but community buy-in, because some And I know it's okay for some that if some families leave, but to me, I want to keep as many families as possible. And I particularly have lost families in my district because they could not get a seat in traditional school. So I'll just say it out there. And I'm not okay with that because I'm looking for us to keep as many students as possible and serve as many of our students versus them going to other outside, whatever it may be.
I think we
So-
all agree with
so I
that
just
statement,
wanna-
Ms. Carter. I
that's
think we
a
want
little
to keep our
different
families,
thing,
for
but-
sure.
Yeah, but anyway, and then just a really quick add-on, because I know some families, when they're moving here, or even before they move here, they use because you look up the address lookup, right? So if this does get approved, I just thinking particularly with the Apex Friendship High School lookup, when you're putting in your address, is there a way to have that, if someone looks the, whatever up and that date or either something written on there, just because that is a tool that families use. And I think that would be just a little helpful for folks who are trying to make sure they understand before either they purchase or they, whatever it may be, rent, whatever that is, just to have that out there if this does get approved. So just want to throw that out there.
So we already have a notification on there that tells you that the school has an enrollment cap, and we ask them to contact the school because just because it has an enrollment cap doesn't mean you're not going to get a seat. It means you may be eligible to be capped out. So we don't want people to just assume because it has an enrollment cap that you're not getting in. In higher growth areas, it's less likely, obviously, but we do have something on the address lookup already.
So, for the kids that might be like enrolling in third grade, I guess.
For
it
the
really- yes.
broader, I think
Yeah.
maybe
So
we can
all the feeder
supply
schools, we can add that to say there's an
something-
enrollment cap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or an additional handout for those data managers at those schools so that families can reference it as they're filling out the mountain of paperwork that we give them.
Well, as we anticipated, another robust discussion. The reality is capping's not a great option. Reassignment's not a great option. Calendar change may be an okay option, but as Ms. Carter noted, if that happens, it needs a lot of community engagement. And some of the question is, which does the community prefer? Major reassignment, and this is not minor, this is major reassignment, and that is not just you, but, right, and I'm talking about the community, it's a bigger community, because as we noted, it'd be Western Wake to Midwestern Wake to less Western Wake, right? So it has a huge snowball effect, so you can't, the year-round discussion is much more a local school community discussion. The reassignment is a countywide kind of discussion. None of these are going to be easy conversations to have. This is not an easy scenario, but the growth has been such, the growth patterns have been such that, there really is sort of no option. So, that's the work we're going to have to do. It's going to take a lot of community engagement. You're absolutely right, Ms. Carter. And it's really going to be the option of massive reassignment or calendar change. And we don't really have a lot of other options.
And I think when you look at a massive reassignment, you're gonna often get feedback from parents that they're not going to the most proximate school or schools. You may have, schools where students live across the street and they're being sent further east. So that is going to be a continued issue, and I know that's a conversation we have had already. The only other alternative, you're looking at trying to keep somewhat semblance of keeping people at approximate school, a calendar change would be the difference. But as you've noted, there are many people in certain parts of the county that do not like that calendar. So I just want to prepare you for when we do get parent feedback, where it was very ideal in a low-growth area where we had parent support for changing a school calendar. Do not anticipate the same support as we move forward. So that is something you're going to need to weigh.
Class size waiver.
Well, and let's remember, our magnet schools partly exist for this function as well. So, our magnet schools create an opportunity. They create calendar opportunities as well as educational opportunities. Part of their role is an operational efficiency to move people from high growth areas to lower growth areas. So, engagement in the magnet process will help address this issue as well. Well, thank you all. I'm going to encourage individual board members to discuss specific capping issues with Ms. Rory and Mr. Carrozza, so that when we come to the board vote, which needs to be coming up in the next board meeting, that at least they're aware of what's on the table, so we can have, as good of a bad process as possible. I don't think anybody really wants to deal with this capping, but we can't do reassignment for next year. We can't build schools for next year. So there's going to have to be some capping done. But so any additional questions, please make sure they get sort of resolved before it comes to the board. I believe it's at our next board meeting, right?
February 1st.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, we're 20 minutes over. If there is new business anybody wants to sort of get on the docket, please just contact me, and I'll be glad to put it on the list. I will note that our upcoming meeting, the discussion that we've talked about having, we've got the schematic design for the middle school, high school that are going in Morrisville. We're going to begin to see the cost model for the CIP coming. And we're moving toward looking at how do we address some of the renovation evaluation. So that is on the docket. Douglas, anything else to highlight? You're good?
I'm good. I didn't have anything else to add unless you all had any questions about the calendar.
Think we're good. So you get the easy presentation. Yeah, I mean, I think very robust discussion. I would love it if we could begin to pursue. I mean, the whole purpose of the K-3 class size legislation is, smaller classes are valuable, particularly when children are having the greatest struggle learning. It is not that there is not struggles in learning in Western Wake, but in higher resourced areas, there is less of a class size issue in terms of the need for the smaller class sizes than there is in higher or less resourced areas. So it feels to me like we can make a legitimate case. I don't have lots of confidence that DPI will accept it, but if we don't, as Ms. Kushner noted, if we don't try, it won't happen. So if we could get any kind of a waiver in the K-3 class size mandate, and if the public knows that, right, they can help put some of that pressure. It's not just us, right? This is the public who is going to either have to be reassigned or calendars are going to have to change, right? They need to put some pressure because it's out of our control. If we didn't have the K-3 class size mandate, it wouldn't solve the problem, but it would sure reduce the problem. So I'd love us to explore some of those areas.
I'm going to check with DPI, but I'm pretty sure the parameters for waivers are in legislation, and so it may take legislative action.
Right.
Similar to what happened when we were looking at multi-track and single-track year-round schools.
Needs to happen, but a lot of work to make it happen. Well, thank you all for another very productive meeting. And with that, Facilities Committee meeting stands adjourned.